We're on. All right. Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone that's here. Welcome for our first, this is our first in-person coffee. And thank you for those of you that are joining and watching later. We're going to record this link. So if you're unable to be with us now, you will have an opportunity to hear from us as your schedule allows. I'm Valerie Hardy, head of secondary schools, and excited to have with me today
Dave Sorrentz, associate principal at the high school.
I'm Rob Carey, associate principal at Henderson.
And so when we had initially planned this coffee, we thought it would be a good time just to touch base before the end of the school year to talk about some of the work we have on the horizon going into next school year, specifically as it relates to our bell schedule, our use of time, and then some other things had started to evolve just around clarity, around standards-based learning and grading. And so we wanted to also make sure we were touching bases on that. But before we really get started, you know, it's also real time, right? And we were like, the elephant in the room is kind of last Thursday. And felt compelled to at least spend a couple minutes talking about that with you all. So if you would just allow us just a few minutes to do so, that would be great. I think last Thursday is the reality that none of us in any capacity, whether you are a parent, whether you're a student, an administrator, a board member, or a community member, ever expect to have to live in reality, even when we go through the trainings, right? And I was reflecting back to our last coffee, we actually were talking about this exact topic. It was actually on the heels of what had happened just down the road in Arlington, and thinking about the training that we were undergoing with the police for a just in case. And our just in case became a reality that we had to execute. And so as we're sort of looking at this from a reflective lens now on the other side, there are a lot of pieces that our team alongside with the police and division leadership are going to be reflecting on tomorrow in real time. We are going to have a debrief with the city police, but a lot of it comes down to those first three things you see on the slide: execution, operations, and communications. And how do we really do a deep dive into those three layers to make sure, you know, from an execution standpoint on the ground, how did things go? From an operations standpoint, functionality, how did things go? And then from a communication standpoint, and where do we have to improve in all three of those things? Similarly, you know, we know the emotional impact for everybody, right? Our students, our staff, for you all as parents, is something that we are going to continue to support our students through. I had many teachers say, and I know you two did as well, it's just a sad reality that this is where our children have to face, that lockdowns and the threat of lockdowns and having to be in a room is just part of school now. And while it is a part of school, we still need to find ways to emotionally make that still an experience that they aren't traumatized from and still feel safe coming back to school. And so I know my inbox, I can't keep up. I'm still behind. The emails of gratitude that have come in from the community, from you all, has been overwhelming, as well as the areas that we need to dig into, offering us some anecdotal feedback that we weren't able to see on the ground. So thank you for your feedback and for your tremendous support of us. And as the campus leader, I will tell you, I need to take a moment to just thank these two, because you know, when you are on the ground and in charge of execution, you just execute. And I checked in on both of them about 9:30 that night, because the reality of being a building leader on the ground is it doesn't hit you what actually happened until you sit down later that night and you realize what actually happened, right? And the leadership toll that takes when you have the stress of that you're carrying can be significant. So I just personally want to take a moment to thank Dave and to thank Rob publicly for their leadership in a moment that no one ever plans for, but you did plan for. And so on behalf of the community and the division, thank you both.
You're welcome. And can we not continue without thanking our teachers and our kids? Our teachers and our kids, at least from a Henderson standpoint, and I think Dave feels the same way, our kids were amazing. They are resilient. They needed to process, and that is okay. That is totally normal. However they handled Thursday, we just want our kids to know that it is totally normal. And that it is understandable if you needed to go home, if you needed to go to the counseling office, if you were ready to learn, you know, all of the ways that you handled Thursday is understandable. And a shout out to our teachers too for leading our kids through that.
Yeah, our teachers, after talking to a lot of the kids the next day, all I kept hearing was, I was okay because of this teacher, or
Mhm.
I was okay because of this. And
Yep.
every teacher stepped up in like just completely different ways,
Mhm.
from barricading the doors to, finding a way to let them know it was going to be okay. But they stepped up,
Yeah.
and you really kind of see what people are made of, because nobody knew what was actually happening. And there wasn't panic, at least not outwardly, right? They
Not
made sure they did
outwardly.
everything that they could to, get them through. So it was really cool stories that came out of this. We'll learn, like Valerie said, we have a debrief coming up. We did a lot of good things, but now we have a real, actual, kind of scenario that we can build from. So we're ready.
So Dr. Noonan will be taking the reins in terms of sharing the after action items from that, just from a division perspective. And obviously here on the secondary campus as one unit, we kind of can function in one way, but how that transfers, right, from a division lens will be the work that will be ahead. And as we have our after action item debrief, I know he'll be sharing that with the community soon. So thank you guys again. All right, so why we really scheduled this meeting. When we were starting to look at some of the things that our Bell schedule has brought us in a unified campus, there's a lot of good that has come from this year, right? Being able to have the same Bell schedule that has the same days associated with it, with the same numbers, was a huge win, right? You didn't have to figure out, is it odd, even, A, B, what block is it, who's going where, right? It was significant for our students and for our staff, I think, and for you as parents to know there was some alignment in being able to know what was happening on any given day. And we did get some synergy in terms of how those blocks have been utilized in terms of academic programming and non-academic programming. And I think as the year has evolved, your lens as parents, you've probably seen some inefficiencies in blocks of time. We certainly have seen some inefficiencies in blocks of times. And our students have even seen some and said to us, yeah, we probably have enough time to get some stuff done in these blocks of time. So we really did come together as first a secondary campus, but then as respective school leadership teams and then school teams to talk about the problem and the solution, right? So what you're going to hear today as we sort of work through this, and Peter Lau will probably jump in for some of this conversation because his mind put together all of our brain dumps, is looking ahead to next year at how we repurpose some of our time so that we can make better use of that non-academic time and bring a little bit more structure to it, recognizing we also still need to have some self-directed time for our students as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Carey, who's going to start a little bit with what that non-academic time is.
Yeah, and we want to be really clear that we're using the term problem loosely. There is greatness that happens during these times, but we, like Valerie said, we wanted to operationalize and become more efficient as a campus. And so as we talk about this, we want to be really clear that we are speaking as a campus. This is a 6-12 conversation that we want to be aligned. At least we want our bells to ring at the exact same time, whether you're in 6th grade or 12th grade. And so on the screen right now, you are seeing words that you probably already heard, and you may struggle to define because there are people in these buildings that struggle to define these words. And it really came to light when we were running a rising 6th grade night. And we had in the chat, like, what's flex, what's pack, what's husky flex? And we were like, we need to define all of these
all
things.
These terms.
Because when you come up and we just say flex, like, sure, it's flex.
I mean, Mr. Carey, in full transparency, our secondary team did not pass this quiz.
It was Dave. No, I'm kidding. They've got a beginning. So we want to kind of ground ourselves in what the non-academic time is that we're speaking to. And at least from a middle school lens, I'll start with PAC, Flex, and Husky Flex. So PAC is our advisory block. PAC is currently 9:30 to 10 every day. And it is our social emotional learning. It is our academic advising. It's really a chance for our kids to build a relationship with an adult and with a small group of kids. They usually average around 12 kids in a pack. And that is kind of their chance to kind of ground themselves in the same situation every day. I know I'm going to pack. I know I'm going to have access to this teacher if I need any sort of guidance. And we do have, right now, we have lessons on Mondays and Fridays. So we have a PAC curriculum team that will send out lessons to the whole school. And then so every single kid is getting the exact same experience when it comes to an instructional lesson weekly. So then we have Flex, and Flex is our intervention and enrichment time. If you are an Oak Street parent, then you know that this is Tiger Paws. So we have kids that require an intervention. And we have kids that actually require enrichment. And so we want all 600 of our kids at the exact same time to be getting what they need. And so mostly every teacher teaches a Flex right now. This year we got a kind of a bind with staffing. And so, our Encore teachers have jumped in, and, so that is what Flex is. And that is 45 minutes of an 80-minute block, which is Flex, sorry, 90-minute block. So 45 minutes of that 90-minute block is Flex. The other 45 is Husky Flex. And Husky Flex is strictly homework time. Husky Flex is, think study hall. Teachers can invite kids to come see them during that time. Teachers cannot invite kids to come see them during that time. It is really, now all of our kids are in a room. Their attendance is taken. But that is that 90-minute Flex block. It is broken up into two 45-minute chunks. So as we went into these conversations from a scheduling perspective, these are the times that we were looking at. And I know at the high school, it is very similar. And Dave, I don't know if you want to speak about Mustang block, stable group, and block 8.
Yeah, we're going to pause for a quick quiz. And then move on. No, so
it's multiple choice. We're good.
Right. So on our side, Mustang block has always been just very unstructured time that happens in the morning, right around 30 minutes. We'll plan to keep some of that, but some of the feedback we've received is also a need for structure and viewing that differently, maybe for a 9th grader compared to a 12th grader. So that's our during the day. And then at the end of the day, that was our block 8 stable group return block. That's probably, if you ever heard any kind of, this is the unstructured, that was a little bit unstructured at times. So that actually was part of the genesis of Mr. Lobb looking at the schedule and saying, are we maybe doing too many moving things to get right back to the start point? So kind of the goal of this is to get rid of all of like the extra movement. And you're going to kind of see we're not removing instructional time, we're actually adding it. We're not going to get rid of, we had a choice, which was, where they got to go do something that they wanted to do. Well, we used to have a rodeo, right? So if we do happen to remove the choice, we'll bring back still another option for them to do that. So we're not going to lose any of the good things, but hopefully what we'll do is have a much more consistent structure to offer the most important pieces to what we had working in the schedule.
And I love how Dave brought up the maybe a different experience for a 9th grader compared to a senior. In our building, the same thing. It may be a different situation for a 6th grader. They might need to focus more on transition to middle school, which we have seen is huge for us and the experiences that our 6th graders live compared to our 8th graders who are ready to dig into more kind of deeper stuff as they transition to high school. So thanks for bringing that up. So again, we don't want to, there's a quiz on what a rodeo is. And I would fail that one. No idea. But yes, we don't want to kind of skim by this as there are bad things happening during this time. We want to bring more structure to the time and more efficiency across buildings. So we have staff available. We have kids that know exactly where to go. And these are kind of the realities of a campus model.
I think the last piece before you go to the next slide,
Yep.
Mr. Carey, too, is we know that there are topics that students want to go deeper in and that we know we need to go deeper in with students, right? Digital literacy is something that we have always had as a bedrock. We need to come back to it more thoughtfully now that we are in a post-COVID reality where we need to help kids have that digital awareness and safety in a broader scale, right? When we talk about social emotional learning, that term is broad, right? And we need to spend more time engaging in dialogues with students so that we are engaging them in what they need, as opposed to us solely delivering a canned curriculum to them. That's feedback the students have given us, right? They love the relational aspect that we've created by having PAC, right? By having the stable groups, but now they want to have more time to have those dialogues around real world topics that come up, right? We had several students that said, where do we talk about Ukraine, right? Like it's happening, but it shouldn't always just be a social studies teacher that carries that responsibility to stop their state curriculum, right? And to talk about what's happening in the world, right? So we know that there are broad topics that we need to also provide that platform for students to have that relational dialogue, and educational platform might not be academic, might be non-academic, but it's still educating them in skills we know they need to be successful in navigating their experience.
this is the school counselor and Valerie coming out.
Lives within.
Right. This is me too, right?
Yes, sir.
So again, problem loosely. What our current bell schedule shows us, and I think that we have heard from our parent community, we've heard from our kids, and we've heard from our teachers as well, is that there 6-12, there seems to be too much downtime, non-academic time, more unstructured time. And when we say lacks consistency, we really want to come to a place where 6th grader, 12th grader, the bells are ringing at the same time. And what is happening during that block may be different. But we want to bring much consistency across campus because we do have staff that go across campus. We do have kids across campus that require an intervention that maybe a teacher in the middle school has a skill for, but they don't have the exact same time available that a high schooler, you know, an 11th grader might need that skill set. So from a staffing standpoint, from a kid standpoint, again, we keep going back to student-centered. We want our kids to know exactly what they're getting into when they come to school. And right now we feel like there may not be, there's some misalignment.
Right. So we knew we had that problem of structure and consistency. So we thought long and hard and said, more structure, more consistency. So I think we nailed it.
If you have feedback, talk to Peter Loud. No, I'm kidding.
But as simple as that sounds, right?
That's why we went to admin school.
Exactly. That was the last semester. But it really started with the bell schedule, and Peter's going to talk about that. So by taking the time to look at it and make sure that we could adjust it so that it did still work 6-12, we think we have, through the feedback of students and teachers and everyone, put a schedule together where we can actually add the structure and consistency and have a place for what Valerie just talked about. So Peter, I think
the next slide.
that's the next one where we can actually look at the schedule.
And this will be shared, just so you know, and everyone at home, this will be shared out so you can.
Here, why don't you
the
come here?
visual. Yeah, you want to pop up?
Why don't you sit right?
Yeah. Here, I'll move.
Sit.
Yeah, go.
So this is our proposed adjustments here, looking for structure and consistency. The first thing I say when we talk to teachers and students, especially here at the high school, we said, this will look familiar to you if you were here before COVID, because this is very similar to the high school bell schedule pre-COVID. So what the visual presents is the colors in the white blocks. The white blocks are our academic blocks that we've been talking about, right? That's when math, history, science, all those things happen. The colored blocks are the things that we were just referencing before. Mustang block, pack, flex, stable group. I missed one more. Okay, all right. And then the green is the only one that's different. What's happening with the green is, again, if you've seen the high school bell schedule before COVID, then the green looks similar. It's a block that happens every single day. So there's 7. A student experiences 7 academic classes. One of those happens each day for a shorter amount of time. So imagine a 9th grade student here. They would have math block 1, let's say, and it's an odd day. So after block 1, they have some passing time. They have some Mustang block time. I'll come back to what might go in the blue. And then they might have block 3 is their Spanish class. And that happens for a shorter amount of time. And then block 5, and then block 7. And the next day, which is even, they would have block 2 in the morning, block 3 once again, 4 and 6.
And when he says shorter amount of time compared to the other classes that day, but the same amount of instructional time over a 2-week period.
Yeah. So the blue time is essentially that stuff that Rob and Dave were just talking about, right? So at the high school, what we've done and why we want to share this with you guys is because we've said we recognize there are some needs outside of the regular Spanish and history curriculum that students need and that teachers need. And we need to make sure that time exists on the schedule. And part of that now, it's our job to figure out the programming, right? I heard Valerie say there's a canned curriculum or there's the what students are demanding. And I think we need to leave some of that flexibility in there to know what's needed at a given time. The orange block is similar there. So this is recognizing that you could do block 3 4 days a week, or on Wednesday, you kind of have a special day where there isn't a block 3 and there's perhaps more structure to that time. Dave referenced rodeo. So in the past at the high school, we had done sort of a monthly thing where we would take this big chunk of time from 9:30 to 11:30. We would bring in our career speaker series. We would do things like those deep dives into enrichment that Valerie was referencing, where we pulled in some parent volunteers or teachers, did some passion projects, and kids got some time to kind of step away from the classroom, but still really get into some stuff that they're interested in. So there's some flexibility here with the schedule for us to allow for some of that throughout the school year.
So block 3 is just 4 days a week.
Correct.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, the question was block 3 is just 4 days a week. And yes, that is correct, right? So Wednesday would be a separate one. Part of that also, we recognize we have short Wednesdays throughout the year. We are, the teachers, and we've previewed this with teachers at both of our schools now and with students at both of the schools. And we recognize that we have like 4-day weeks throughout the year. And so is this something we need to adjust for when Memorial Day or Labor Day or whatever? We're not totally there yet, but the kids pointed that out. The teachers pointed it out, right? Like, how do we make this work? Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the middle school?
Yeah. Do you want me to get on camera? Or
Sure.
Okay. So one of Peter's points was that the blue and the orange are purposely not labeled. And that is because that time will absolutely look different from a middle schooler perspective and a high schooler perspective. So we purposely did not name them. So this could be PAC, this could be our intervention block. There will be less. So when we talk about Husky Flex right now is 45 minutes of a study hall, kids have more access to that type of time at other parts of the day. So what I would imagine is that this time will become a little bit more structured at the middle school. It will not be the orange will not be 55 minutes of a study hall. This is going to be very like deliberate. This could be part of our enrichment block. And so basically how we're saying it is that the bells are going to absolutely ring at the exact same time with very similar things happening within, but it is age appropriate. So it is, our 6th graders might be getting a lesson on something that an 8th grader is not, but our kids will have structured programming during that time. With an addressing of, yes, we've had too much downtime. Yes, Husky Flex can sometimes feel a little long, or our kids aren't getting as much homework, or they're doing it at different times. And so we want to bring the experience for every middle schooler with more structure, but it will be different from the high school.
So why this was exciting. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you for this issue. It sounds like a wonderful proposal. It's important. I'm going to push you a little bit, though, since we have times up there on the screen. Since the bell schedule is under dialogue, has anyone thought about the concept of a later start time? There are a lot of professional societies that encourage later start time to increase academic health and even decrease accidents. Pediatrics, Sleep Foundation, American Psychological Association, other things like that. So I realize change is incremental, and I appreciate fixing this quote unquote problem. But has there been any dialogue about further advancement in the future?
So thank you for the question. Just for those of you that are listening online, the question was around, has there been any further dialogue around potentially looking at pushing the start times back, recognizing that there's a lot of research around sleep times and later start times, specifically for older adolescents. I do know that in my first year here, I believe the bell schedule was pushed back 30 minutes. It was at 7:30, and I think it did move back to 8 o'clock. And that would be something that any other shift of a start time would be something that would have to align at a division level and a board level. And so that's sort of out of our scope in terms of when we were looking at this specifically. So that was not a parameter that we took into consideration, but certainly I'm aware of the research that you are referencing as well.
Does that mean if it comes from the board that you would consider that?
So we are under the purview of right now what our school start times are. And so that's what we were operating under, recognizing like as a jurisdiction, it's more than just the impact to us at the secondary, right? It's a larger system issue around transportation and start times for all the other buildings. So that would be a much larger division level dialogue than just at the secondary. Right now, I think it's working. Our kids are getting to school. They're coming. And I think from a standpoint of the end of the day, one of the things I'm growing and seeing in my lens here, Dave's laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh, how many rescheduled games this week? The back end for our high school students is hard. especially this time of year when they are traveling great distances for athletic competitions. I'm sort of peeking at Miss Hollinger, who's our AA at the middle school, but also a track coach. And I think one day this week she texted us, or last week, and it was 11:30, I believe. The track team got home. And, and I think about that too, like starting later means they're getting on the road later to these games and getting home later. So, there's trade-offs on both sides. And right now the kids are getting here, they are able to get out. And I know our students have rich extracurricular lives as well. So I do think it's a balance. So from an opinion standpoint, I don't know.
Yeah.
I see trade-offs both ways.
Lots of trade-offs, but what's unique to us as far as athletics is we have a significantly higher number of student athletes compared to surrounding districts just because of our size.
And they're eighth graders as well.
Yeah, and if and we do it, they leave early because our districts are, the travel is far. So the longer you extend the day, just as a note, the more academic time that the student athletes would miss. Just that's really unique to kind of our system.
I was just going to say, I appreciate this discussion, and not that I'll just speak for the entire school board, but as a school board member, I would just encourage you to pay attention, to reach out, to let the school board know what you think. It's definitely something that's always under consideration. We're always just trying to make sure that we're balancing all of these, complicated factors. So don't hesitate to reach out and learn and read and hear what we're already discussing, and encourage you to keep discussing it. It's not an easy issue.
For those that couldn't hear, that was board member Tice saying, if you have any questions, please reach out to your board members about this topic.
Well done.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Times out there. I'm a sixth grade parent, and I was very surprised when I saw the schedule at the beginning of the year, that there are lots of time for each block is an hour and a half.
Sure.
And I just remember, when I was that age, like, that would be a really long time. And I'm just kind of curious how that shift has happened. That's been going on years ago that I was in school. I'm just kind of curious, like, how we got there.
Yeah, middle school block scheduling sort of evolved in the late 90s as really a methodology for teaching. It does not necessarily mean that teachers are providing direct instruction for 90 minutes. So at middle school, and especially in sixth grade, you'll find a lot of the classes are about a 20-minute duration. And I think post-COVID, they've shrunk just a little, but it's a chunking of instruction in that time. So students are getting direct instruction or moving to small group instruction or having some sort of activity. But that shift has been sort of wide sweeping across middle schools in the United States in particular. So it has been a shift since we were in school, where it was more of a 45 to 50-minute block of time. But the instructional continuity and gains that have come from a research base really do live in the longer blocks of time, and how much of that time actually boils down to instruction usually does come down to about an hour. When you factor in transitions, when you factor in starting the class, ending the class, it's about a 60-minute block.
But even anecdotally, like the same, I went through high school with the 45-minute classes, but it really makes it less likely that you'll have an entire class of direct instruction. Because while you could have punted for 40 or 45 minutes and said, I'm just going to go up and this is my lecture day, you certainly can't do that with 90. So you see a lot more of the mini transitions happening, and lots of, they'll transition 3, 4, 5 times during that 90 minutes, or else, to your point, you're not going to be able to keep attention. You're using like a traditional listen to me style of teaching.
And when we talk about the transition in middle school, this is on the list, right? Like our sixth graders, they come here and they're like, oh my goodness, like that kid's got a beard, right? Like seriously. So like they're like, their eyes are wide open to him. No, I was not a kid. It's not me. And these kids up here, I'm like, I knew you when you were in 4th grade. You're humongous. And so yes, this is on the list of how we transition our sixth graders up, because their eyes are wide open to a brand new huge campus.
Huge, yeah.
It's a brand new world, and this is on the list of how we help them transition.
I do remember the days of the daily block from when Truman about to graduate.
Oh my god! Speaking
Oh my
of,
gosh.
yeah.
And I'm trying to think, are there any? Because it's kind of unique, right? Like if you have band, you got to bring your trumpet every day or whatever, right? Are there any classes that you would never have as block 3.
So that is,
Yes.
thank you for bringing that up. And our teachers did bring that up as well when we brought this out. You know, there are some courses that don't yield themselves as nicely to that block. And so working with Matt Sowers and Sia Knight in our counseling department, we are going to have to look at which courses don't live in that block 3 as neatly versus which courses actually might benefit from a daily block 3.
So the answer is yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you first. Just thank you for looking at this because I have been asking for this. So thank you. I am just wanting, and maybe you're going to go over this a little bit more specific about what I hear you saying a lot of like, well, we could do this or we could do this, but I also have felt that this year, and I work and know a lot of different kids, and for some of them they use that time so wisely, and some of them really haven't. So I guess like especially like, and I get the 6th grader is different than a 12th grader and a 9th grader is different, but how do you massage that? And can you give us more specifics about what is actually going to occur and what choice or not choice kids are going to have? Because that's where I'm also sometimes seeing a push-pull.
Mhm.
So I can jump. Do you want me to start from the middle school?
Can I go big and then you go?
You go big.
So just from a timeline perspective, we're in May. And the reason that we were sort of pushing to get some consistency here with our staff and our students was we needed to align on where are we united and where do we need to have some school specific input so that we could get that part set. Now we have to get input with our teachers on the tightness of the structure within those respective blocks of time, if that makes sense. Because where we are always a step behind and where we feel it as educators is in the what we do. We always say, oh, we have this great Husky Flex block or Flex block, or we have this great time now with block 8 to build out this curriculum. Ta-da, it's summer. Everybody comes back in August and we're like, what are we doing during this block? Right? And we're building it on the fly and then life happens, right? Why we were really pushing to get this done now is so that we can be intentional going into our summer curriculum writing process when we've got time, when we've got teachers who want to invest in this and work alongside Dr. Dippold, who leads a lot of our summer curriculum writing projects, and actually get the curriculum built so that we're ready to present it to teachers and have it ready to be delivered at the start of the year. So part of why we can't give you all of the specifics right now is because we've released it back to our teachers to say, so now that this is what we're doing, let's get tight on the how. So just so you have sort of that big picture, like, where's the funnel? We're like here in the funnel going into summer writing, because that's really been our push. We need to maximize our summer writing time.
So
Okay.
let me offer, and having what Valerie just said, nothing is set in stone. But an example, I think, of the structure that we've talked about is our old Mustang block, right? For grade 9, 10, 11, 12, it was traditionally 30 minutes, 38 minutes, do whatever you would like. You know, go to a teacher, which for a 12th grader, they got that, right? Most of the time, they know exactly where to go. For our rising 9s, they never had any kind of introduction as to what this is, especially it was highlighted this past year where they've had a couple of years out of the building and really kind of lacked that transition. So like I said, nothing decided, but maybe for a 9th grader, instead of coming up, here's Mustang block, figure it out, maybe you check in with the teacher and you have some time to say, this is a lesson on how you might utilize this time. So those are the types of structures we're talking about on the most basic level. And then Valerie's talking about like our stable and the actual lessons that we are, believe it or not, planning over the summer. We have curriculum development teams because it's been a miss. It really has. We've had really good lessons for short periods of time. And that's the feedback we get from teachers and students. When they're good, we love it. When it feels like it wasn't really planned, everybody kind of knows that. And then it feels like a waste of time. And that's when I think people kind of get angry and it feels like it's a misuse of their time. So that's what we think we're in a position to finally move past that and have this feel, like we said, structured and meaningful for everyone that's involved.
And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that a huge population of our kids require services during these times.
Mhm.
And so we cannot just freely plan. We have kids that require intervention services, and at least in the middle school, they require enrichment services,
In high school.
and in the high school too. So there's a really large part of our population of kids that must receive a service during this time. And so it is not a free for all, let's program. And we're also not losing, at least from the middle school, PAC is a must. We stand by PAC. It is, our teachers have really grown into loving this time. And so some sort of PAC enrichment and intervention must happen. And so we do have structures to our planning, which, you know, is not, we're not sharing specifics right now, but all those come into play when we are planning those blocks of time.
And Peter Gobb is nodding his head over there because that was a big part of this, is the intervention. While it's not a giant percentage of our students, it's a section that really does require that intervention, and that time is still built into the schedule.
So what's exciting about this, because I'm going to bridge us just looking at our
Yeah.
time, is thinking about the ninth graders, because we're going to kind of come back to them as we move into standards-based learning and grading. As they were talking to us about their experience transitioning to the high school, we heard a lot of, we miss that space that's like PAC, right? So to Dave's point around having a space to give that structure and that introduction to high school, but also that space to have a relational aspect coming into this building, even though it's just across the hall. I think we're also seeing it, and do you mind going to the next slide, if you don't mind? Yep. We're also seeing it here as it plays out with our standards-based learning and grading, and then student assessment. And so I do want to just point out again, Peter Laub over to the side here, and then Dr. Rory Dipple, who is our IB NYP coordinator, because they have done a tremendous amount of work alongside our teachers this year. And as we make this shift to this portion of the agenda, I'm going to frame this, and then would love for you all to just jump in as well if there's some points of clarification you wanted to add. But we wanted to come back to our why, because I know that this has been a year, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, as a reporting element for this as well, because we are living it alongside of you and your students in trying to decipher and decode some of what comes out of Power School. But one of the things that this journey has taken us on, because it did start in 2018, believe it or not, I feel like the pandemic sort of felt like a disruption in this work, but it still was moving forward. We have grown as educators, because when you look at sort of what the overarching outcome is of standards-based learning and grading and how we're doing assessment, it really is to give students greater voice and choice in their learning, and to give them a clearer representation of their achievement. Not so much the platform, but from a philosophical standpoint, to really look at how they're taking that real world learning and applying it to what they're able to do on an assessment, a summative assessment specifically, and then increasing that rigor as they go throughout the scope of their learning journey. And then aligning those assessments ultimately to their long-term curricular or real world goals. And then getting better at the feedback that we're providing to students. And that helps them then own their learning. And so from an overarching why, I think it's important to remember this is actually the root of the work and why we're doing it. I don't know if Dr. Dippold or Mr. Laub, if there's anything you wanted to add to that or clarify, you need to come to the mic back.
Yeah.
I get new friends.
Come
Hi. This is fun.
It's like being on a talk
It
show.
is.
I know.
Welcome to the
Hi,
scene.
yes,
I don't have any
yes, nice
coffee
to
for
be
you,
here.
but there's one over
Yeah,
there. There is coffee. I just don't have it in a fancy mug.
So I'll jump in first. So Rory Dippold, as Valerie has already mentioned, NYP coordinator. I would say, having been at Henderson for now 16 years and thinking about the work that we've done even in the last 3 to 4 years related to standards-based learning and grading around our assessment design and practices, the teachers are saying the rigor, the clarity for students, that focus on feedback and having students take and that agency has become much more unified, and students are really diving deeper into the curriculum. So I've had conversations the past week, 2 weeks, with teachers around this, and they're sharing that. The students are sharing that as well. So again, this is a huge win. There are definitely areas we need to definitely work on, especially power school, and we are fully aware of that, and we are working on that. But just thinking about historically where we have been and where we are, we have to celebrate that, and it is a huge win. So I'll pass it over to Peter.
I'll
as well.
say, so I'll echo that. Peter Laub, I'm an assistant principal here, but I've been at the high school for 10 years now as a former teacher, and as someone who helped shepherd SB LNG into our lives. Rory often reminds me of these successes, and that perspective is really important for me personally, but also for the school and for the high school. And when I talk to students and teachers, there is frustration over the platform and how this is presented. And then we talk about the alignment of the assessment, the quality of the assessment, and the curricular goals. And you hear the wins and you hear about the achievements. And even the students, once they get past the grumbling of, well, I can't see this, or I don't know what this means, they recognize the depth of the feedback, the quality of the feedback, the shift in the assessment design and the growth. And so those things are not easy to quantify all the time, but they're there. And I am really proud of where we've come as a school. And as a, I taught the IB DP courses, which we've had here in Falls Church City prior to adopting the MYP program. And the teachers that were there recognized a lot of this is there. Like a lot of the philosophy is already ingrained in what we believe in the DP program. And so part of, I think, the growing pains that we've experienced is how expanding that across 6 through 10 and aligning that with the 11th and 12th there. So yeah, that's some of my perspective.
So one of the things that's interesting is, as we were thinking about, the work ahead, you hear us sort of speaking to the reporting, because I do think that that is the biggest barrier we have to being able to exhibit our why fully. So I tried to put this in 3 clean buckets to talk about with you all today, right? There's the philosophy around grading and why this is sort of a value that we hold as a school system, right? And 2 books that I put there are 2 books that kind of are really the benchmark for standards-based grading and assessment, just for not just for us, but really nationally and internationally. On Your Mark, and then the book that we all read together around this is Standards-Based Learning in Action. And so, if you ever wanted to take a deep dive alongside us and become a practitioner, I'm sharing them for your summer reading lists as well. But it's not just work that's isolated to just, IB schools, to just Falls Church City. A lot of our local jurisdictions are having these exact same conversations, even in some of our big neighbors around us, around how their high school programs begin to adopt to a standards-based approach. So we're not working in a little bubble of, we're trying to do something that's just an outlier. This really is the way that grading and reporting and assessment is starting to evolve, and it has been evolving internationally. It's really coming along, though, here nationally. So there's that philosophical approach, right? Big, broad understanding. But then there are the practices, right? Like what is happening day to day in the classrooms that your students are going into, and where is that consistency? And I think that is where this team's work, right? As I say this team, I'm sort of, reaching out to our leadership team here, really comes into play. Both Rory and Peter, along with one of our teacher leaders, Jamie Osborne, have spent this year working with a committee comprised of middle and high school teachers, really digging into our assessment philosophy, and then thereby developing some practices that will evolve out of that to help us get better at aligning those practices, not only within departments, but across departments, because we see it and we hear it too. There are some inconsistencies in terms of how kids are getting formative feedback, the frequency, are the formatives aligned to the summatives fully? That's the work that we have to get back to now that we're back, right? We've all been sort of treading water, but we know we've got to now get back to the bread and butter of what we do, which is getting clarity, tightness, and coming back to what our teachers love doing, which is digging into this work. But it's all predicated on the big number 3, which I made bold, is being able to report it. If students can't see where they are formatively to know where they're growing to summatively, if teachers can't put it in a system cleanly and easily to be able to show it to students and parents and for them to be able to see it, we know that that is the misfire, and that has been I think a frustration since the inception of standards-based grading, if we're being fully candid, is trying to figure out how we get Power School to mirror what our practices and our philosophy are. And each year we get a little closer. Each year we think we've got it figured out. And then we realize, oh, that's not what they see. That's what we see. Oh, that's what that report generated. That's not what we were told it would generate. And I do feel like this year we got probably the deepest dive we've ever gotten behind the scenes in terms of Power School, and have some really good thinking partners that we're working with outside of the division as well to help us really build the right reporting structure going into this upcoming year, but without a portal to really show you that. We really respect and understand where the frustrations lie for students, and then for you all as parents to be able to monitor and know how you can support your students in their learning journey. And so I know that that's the face that many of you feel when that report comes out. And that's how we feel the week before when we're drafting the email to send you, because we know that this is the face you're going to feel when that report comes out. But truly, we know the three things we need to get right? We need to simplify the language. It's a lot of words just to know what your kid is doing and how they're performing. It needs to be easy to comprehend, and it needs to be easy to access. And so, going into this upcoming year, that really is the work alongside of our central office leadership that we know we need to do to help make the reporting align with the philosophy and the practices that are right by our why. Questions?
I just want to add from dealing with for the last 3 years, it has gotten better.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yay,
I feel like
baby
it's
steps.
much more clear now than it was in 6th grade, and that's not just my own learning curve. It's like it actually looks. There's definitely room to grow. So it has gotten better.
Thank you for that feedback.
I love it, but it's that for that one. I think you guys have done a good job of trying to.
Thank you for that. The feedback was it has gotten better in the platform a little bit in terms of being able to see it. Still room to grow, but it's gotten a little clearer over the past 3 years.
It is better, and I will just give you guys all a huge compliment, because I think I have a senior, I have a 7th grader, and the experience has been kind of night and day. Like with the senior, you were piloting it. Some classes had it, some didn't. It was understandably everyone's confused. My 7th grader totally gets it. Like he knows exactly what criteria he needs to work on. He knows when he gets a bad formative grade, that signals he needs to do more work with the summative. And he must have amazing teachers, amazing folks there who have taught him how to really benefit from it. And I do think it's better for them. I think they're learning better. I think that they're going to be better equipped for whatever they do after high school, because going through this system from 6 to 12. So there are growing pains, but I really appreciate the work you all are doing to make it work for the kids, and we parents will catch up. We'll figure it out.
Oh, thank you for that. The feedback was seeing the difference in students from 2 perspectives of a senior and a 7th grader, and seeing the growth that's happened over time has been helpful. Yes.
Again, we're all moving in the right direction, right? That a lot of local districts are also looking at this, and I much appreciate all the work that I know that all of you have done over time, and recognize, the contagion of this process. I have to bounce back to number 2 practice, though, which is, can you elaborate on, I heard that even in this conversation a couple minutes ago, the word 10th grade. Like, where is that speech going in that practice realm in the future? Is that speech going to move forward with our 12th graders? Because those of us, you're right, I split kids too. And our 12th graders actually don't typically get graded in an SPG scenario, whereas our, say, 9th graders and 7th graders do. So what is the practice?
So I think right now we're definitely in a pattern of working through where we are before we look to expand beyond where we are at the current moment. Dr. Noonan has said he would like for us to continue to be an SBG school system, but knows that COVID impacted our ability to have that reach to keep growing practices in the timeline we had initially laid out. So I think we're doing a realistic look at what's right for our capacity, what's right for our students, and not moving too fast just for the sake of moving, but also making sure we've got capacity for our kids and our staff. Because I think one of the things I'll speak to, and if you all want to chime in, please do. Coming back this year, our 8th grade students who have lived it for 3 years, coming into 9th grade, are like, bring it, like we're ready, right? And some of our 9th grade teachers are like, we're ready too. And some are like, I think we're ready, right? And so we've got to make sure we're meeting everybody where they are, so we're not setting either party up for a space where it's frustrating.
I appreciate that answer, but I'm going to speak a little bit more. So fully understand you're assessing the situation, and like you said, very forward, we have good practices in place to carry forward success of teachers and students. So are you saying that you don't have clarity, you're still dialoguing about whether or not it's a moves from 9th into 10th students? Are you saying that you're still dialoguing on that point? Or are you saying you made a determination that it will not advance? If the determination is that it may not advance for the students who want to be practicing this for 4 years, then what is how are you going to help them, I'll use the word transition back to a traditional system that had much more due dates and deductions for late admissions, which is again contrary to the philosophy you've been encouraging us all to accept for the past few years. And how are you going to get those teachers on board?
So I think that's why it's step 1 and step 2, right? It's 1, we're trying to look at what courses did students sign up for, which teachers do we have onboarded for next year, and what's the right fit and match before we can definitively say, here's where we are. And we're in the midst of that, like literally in this moment, is assessing what courses we have, which teachers we have, who's back next year, and what are the right people without overloading a teacher with many preps to see how we continue the fidelity of moving forward, or having to see maybe it's these courses and these courses. So the reason I can't give you a definitive answer right now is this is when that work happens, right? And so once that is determined and Dr. Noonan has an opportunity to work alongside us with Mr. Bates and make sort of some final decisions, then we'll certainly be communicating that clearly to everybody. Sure.
I'd like to add one thing. Are you gonna say something?
Yeah, that's okay.
The grading and reporting committee that Peter, Jamie, and I have been working on, we have been looking at this holistically around practices 6th through 12th grade. So
Thank you for that piece. Yeah.
if 11th grade, like next year, 11th grade is not SPG, the teachers, the departments have been in discussion around how to kind of look at this approach and practices in general.
Yeah, and I went back to this slide because I was thinking about your comment that said, we have had some successes. I still have some complaints, right? And I'm like, I wonder as a parent or even as a student where we're seeing the successes in these 3 things. I think that they're ordered intentionally. Any system, you better have the philosophy first, the practices next, and then the way to report it third. And I've read both of these books and they put reporting at the back. That being said, that's the very first thing a student and parent sees.
Sure is.
So I can't help but wonder, are the successes in the reporting, or are we getting better as a school with numbers 1 and 2, and therefore it's starting to come out a little bit cleaner? When I think about a 7th grader who's got it, probably it's because number 1 and number 2 are clicking for the student, for the teacher, for the team, for the school. That takes time. And reporting has been really messy, and we fully recognize that. But I do think we're getting a lot better at 1 and 2. And therefore, number 3 follows just naturally. So going back to the comment that Rory was making about this. So the committee that we worked together, we pulled some teachers together and we said, hey, we don't really have like a Falls Church City grading philosophy per se, or assessment philosophy. There's one that goes with IB, but what do we believe in as a school? So that was some of the work that we did. If we get an 11th grade teacher and a 6th grade teacher to agree on a grading philosophy, for instance, I won't grade students on whether they sharpen their pencils or not, by example. Okay, then whatever practices are implemented in that classroom, standards-based grading or color-based grading or letter-based grading or whatever, would align to that philosophy of what we do and do not assess students on. So that was our goal with that committee, was to establish some of that consistency across the school with regard to the philosophy, so that we can make sure our practices are in alignment with that, and then our reporting does all the things that go with that.
Given that this dialogue is still going on, and recognizing the prior point that you actually need to start putting the blocks in place now, so you can that work and continue over the summer and fall. What is the timeline for that? we expect back on this work.
By the end of the school year, we will have clarity. Yes, and communication, not just clarity, but communication.
One
Yes.
thing that I would ask that you all take into consideration is we're in this transition time. That's really clear, right? And it sounds like we've decided the juice is worth the squeeze. I like that. I think it's important because there is that squeeze right now in that transition. Give me thinking about how this affects our kids from a mental health perspective. The ambiguity, I think, for some kids is okay, and for others, it just really heightens the anxiety. And I think for certain parent-kid conversations, if that first thing is the reporting, it can really create some difficult conversations, or some confused conversations, or some the picture. Or I want to throw my head up. So one thing that I would request is, as we are recognizing that we're in this transition, if you all as leaders and help us as parents also, and our kids understanding a little bit of, like, going back to the sixth grade, like what you say, that can really help us, because I do think it is for certain kids taking a toll from a mental health perspective. And I know that that's not the intention. I think the intention is actually the exact opposite of that. But I think that the practice and the reporting piece is not, it's going to be a couple of years at least. Like, I think we have to recognize that. And in the interim, what do you say?
Mhm. So the feedback was just making sure as we're doing this transition, I like that, the juice and squeeze, how we honor sort of the mental health needs of students who have been sort of looking to the grade and the stress that it causes when there's ambiguity, and looking from formative to summative and not having that definitive clarity, and offering parents some guidance as well on how to help support students at home with that. And looking at our time, it is 10:02. So I do want to be respectful of that, because I know, Dave, you have 2 more slides on here. And I know that there is another meeting in here at 10:30. If there are additional points of feedback around standards-based learning and grading, we will add to this PowerPoint a way for you all to continue to give us some of that feedback as we're going into this upcoming summer. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of work that happens over the summer as we're starting to think about the building out of communications and needs from a parental perspective too. Because we do want to make sure, Dr. Dippold and then our new DP coordinator, who will be announced to the community soon, will be working together to make sure that we are providing some of that programming to you all as we come back to start the school year.
Pleasure being on the show.
Oh, yes, hi. You didn't even get any coffee. Take it up with your supervisor. All right. It's 10:03.
I'm going to be fast. This is just a preview, but it's kind of exciting. Something we've had High C in the high school, and whether you're familiar with that or not, I'll give you the very kind of quick.
How many of you are familiar with High C? I'm just curious by a show of hands. High C programming?
Yeah, kind of, right? Even
Kind of.
some teachers sometimes ask exactly what it is, but it really is just an online learning program where somebody can sign up for a class that they basically do on their own virtually. But we also have 4 teachers assigned in this building: math, science, English, and history, who are also, they can be assigned to that person to work side by side, but very loosely structured. So one of the takeaways that we got from our pandemic and students learning virtually was that they learn differently, even virtually. Some really respond to the structure list and they like to work on their own and they can go right through it. But there's a whole nother set that really does require the additional structure to be successful using it that way. So we're trying to make some upgrades to our High C program, High C 2.0. And what we're really looking to do is kind of leverage the benefits. And you'll see in here, I have structured timelines, in parentheses, playlists. And a playlist is really just a very organized syllabus. So what we talked about, some summer curriculum planning. Some of that summer planning will be around High C, and we're going to, in all likelihood, pilot this with a couple of courses. So econ personal finance, for example. It's a course that a lot of kiddos have taken online, either, as rising ninth graders, they might do it over the summer, but a lot of kids will still do it in high school. So in this case, we might give them the option. We're going to enroll you in this high C where you can do this on your own, but we might have 3 or 4 classrooms where if you decide during this certain unit, I need a little bit more structure, which I know because I looked at my playlist. Now I can, so it's a true hybrid setup to online learning. It's kind of cool. What it's going to do for us is provide flexibility in scheduling, right? It can allow for some of our really effective teachers to get themselves in front of a lot more kiddos at one time, but it's also just going to give us the flexibility to support kind of everything, including IB. I don't want to offer too much. This is like, the early phases, but I did want to kind of lay the groundwork that this is something that we're working on, and this will be a pilot that's happening next year.
So one of the things that's coming out of the strategic plan is, the innovation and innovative practices that we've taken from COVID, and how are we still going to carry some of that forward? Because one of the things that a lot of us saw was there was a lot of good work put in by our teachers during COVID, a lot. And we don't want it to just come to an abrupt halt. And as Dave and the team at the high school are really digging into this high C program and looking at where is there a room for that to continue, this program really is it. And so when you hear Dave talk about playlists, it's sort of taking away this, you're in an online program and you can access the teacher to, yes, you're in this online program, but let's give you a little bit more structure, kind of how we did while we were virtually. Let's give you touch points where you can maybe come sit in the classroom or sit outside of the classroom, or know that the teacher is available at this time, right? We're going to give you all those same access points we gave you while you were virtual, with a little bit more of a timeline to check in, right? So that you can get things done a little bit more efficiently. And with a course that a lot of students do select to take either over the summer or at a different time in the year, just because they've got other courses and programming, either from an IB perspective that they're trying to fit in as well. So,
and a really good example would be like for a science course, we typically didn't have a physical lab associated with it. This would give us the opportunity to have a lab in that scheduled on that playlist that a student could either participate in physically or virtually. But that was probably one of the misses before. We lost all of the kind of the physical components when we went virtual. So we're trying to bring that part back to, like Valerie said, with a more formalized schedule, so they know, when they're behind, or what they're going to be good at, what they won't be good at, so they can really kind of plan ahead looking at the year. Initially, it's to broaden, but we're certainly looking into the possibility of being able to add additional, not in the initial phase though.
So the question, could you
taking personal finance over the summer, which I feel like half at least of our kids do that, right?
Right.
Is it still, would it in the future, would it still be the same way it's always been, or is it now this system, which is a little bit more structured, or do they have an option?
They have the option, right? It's 1.0 or 2.0.
Right. So the question was, will we make this change over the summer? And of course, it won't happen for this summer. But as with any pilot, if we see that it's very beneficial, I'm sure we will try to move that into the summer as well.
Falls Church City Public Schools assemble the materials themselves, or is it like a national?
Right now, it's Falls Church City Public Schools.
Our employees. All right, last slide. We're not that far over. It's 10:09. We did well. We did good. We did good. Thank you all for coming and for this year. It's funny. I always feel like the end of the year, like, what could this year bring? What could this year bring? On every piece of wood, right? But truly, thank you. It's been another year of growing, I think, for us in this model, and it's been kind of fun growing in this model together. And thank you for your continued support and your patience and your feedback, because we can't get better without you. And it's nice to have you back. So we look forward to having many more of these as we go into next year. As always, if you have questions, Please reach out to them. I'm kidding. Please reach out to
No, Dave wore a blazer without telling me, so we're gonna have to debrief this meeting.
Best part-
If
That's
you
part
all
of my
only
dad.
knew the text chain that happens sometimes, I'm like, oh my gosh, pick whatever you're wearing. It's Rob. It's Rob.
Not last night, obviously. No.
Truly, thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone. You wanna let us know, Steve? Are we good?